The Liberal Party here in Canada announced yesterday that they will aim for net zero carbon dioxide emissions for the year 2050. This comes after countries met in New York for the United Nations Climate Action Summit. Canada did not attend because we're currently in an election. One of the agreements to come out of this meeting was the Climate Ambition Alliance that basically says 65 countries that did sign on will work towards net zero carbon dioxide emissions by the middle of the century. The United States nor China was one of the countries that signed on to this. Catherine McKenna, Canada's former Environment and Climate Change Minister and now Liberal candidate for Ottawa-Center, she made this announcement in a press conference yesterday, and this was carried on live TV.
Millions of people around the world know the stakes, especially our young people. Young people are taking in the streets. They are telling us as leaders that we are facing the challenge of our generation and that we must step up and we must keep moving forward. Young people such as Greta Thunberg are driving this debate with their words and their actions, and they're holding us accountable. And I want to thank them for that. Even if their words may be pointed, their message is too important to ignore. Just yesterday, leaders from around the world, from government, the private sector, from civil society, came together in New York to chart the path ahead. The aim of the United Nations Climate Action Summit is simple. Ensure that as a global community, we come up with a realistic plan to achieve our Paris Agreement targets based on science and to reach net zero emissions by mid-century. 66 governments, along with leading businesses and other organizations, took the net zero pledge. To get there, we all need to do our part. Today, I'm happy to announce that a re-elected Liberal government would also take up this pledge, that we will also commit to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. We're in an election right now, so we can't go to the international community with any pledges about the future. But it's up to Canadians to decide in this election whether we keep on moving forward on protecting on the environment, on building on our climate plan, or whether we go backwards. Our promise is this: a re-elected government will commit to reaching net zero for Canada's greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. What does that mean? That means not putting any more carbon pollution into the air than we take out. I'll be frank, it's an ambitious target. That's why we're also pledging to appoint a group of experts to help us chart the path to a net zero future. And it is why we will legislate 5-year targets along the way. And let me tell you how incredibly important it is that we legislate the targets. That action on climate change can no longer be a partisan issue.
My concerns are, how would the government pick these scientists for the panel? Would they be Canadian? Already, climate scientists who don't agree with the findings of the IPCC and the UN are demonized. Catherine McKenna does that nonstop. Would their views be shut out of the process? What would be the penalties for not meeting the targets? As a government, as a business, and for individuals? Would there be hefty fines? Would there be a climate jail for climate criminals? This video isn't about my opinion about climate science. One thing I find people don't get to see unless they catch it live is how the politician responded to questions. I find that when Catherine McKenna is not in a room of supporters and confronted by hard questions that she cannot answer, she gets really emotional, almost angry. Then she starts to go into her lines of attacking conservatives like Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, Andrew Scheer, and then she ramps up the climate change alarmist rhetoric. And finally, she'll start to plead with us to start thinking of our children and the dire state of the earth. Let's see how she did today with the reporter's questions.
I am now happy to take questions. I'll take one question and one follow-up, and I know many of you, but maybe you could just say the organization you're from.
Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. Some have suggested that your government now has actually been quite timid in your climate action, that you have not gone far enough. You're still, I think, at least 80 million tons shy of the 2030 target as we sit now. You're planning to legislate 5-year targets. Can you talk about what the legislation actually means, what the penalties would be, and how you actually intend to get beyond the 2030 targets?
Our government has a plan that includes over 50 measures. We negotiated for a year with provinces and territories. Unfortunately, some provinces have moved back, but let's talk about what's in our plan to meet our target. We have a clear plan to meet our 2030 target. It's everything from phasing out coal, investing in renewables, ensuring a just transition to workers, making historic investments in public transportation, like right here in Ottawa. The LRT will be the largest reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the city's history, developing a new net zero building standard, making historic investments in energy efficiency, supporting clean technology companies, and doing more. We announced that we would double the amount of nature that we would protect, that we will ban certain single-use plastics and ensure that we hold producers responsible for the plastics that they produce. And I've learned over the last 4 years that we do need to legislate targets. Because unfortunately, what has happened is we are fighting conservative politicians and premiers at every turn. Unfortunately, we have provinces led by conservatives like Doug Ford who would rather spend money fighting climate action in court rather than fighting climate change. We have Andrew Scheer who said he would follow that example. He would cut the programs that we have brought in, everything from incentives to electric vehicles to the historic investments that we're making in energy efficiency, in public transportation, to making it free to pollute, to getting rid of our better rules for major projects, which include a climate test. That we need to be making progress, and climate action can no longer be a partisan issue. So with a panel of experts, we will look at what does it mean to be net zero emissions by 2050, and every 5 years we will have a plan to get there. And we are joining countries around the world. 66 governments have signed up for this. We have leading businesses. Why? Because the strongest countries, the strongest businesses will be those that have embraced a cleaner future, that are working with businesses like Switch Energy that I'm with right here today, because they understand that not only do we have an obligation to our kids to build a better future, we have a huge economic opportunity, and Canadians and Canadian workers need to be the forefront of that.
You didn't actually answer the question about what the penalties would be for legislating, and if you can answer in French as well.
Well, look, we're making this announcement in terms of the penalties. I mean, I think the point is right now, first of all, we need to get elected. We need to get, through this election, because the choice is really clear. We have conservatives led by Andrew Scheer who would do none of this, who would take us back in time, who would make it free to pollute, would remove all the programs that we've brought in. So we will be, if we are reelected, we will look at how best to do this, what are the best practices around the world. We will work with experts to do this, and we will have legislated path to get there.
I have 3 quick questions, yes, no, and then a follow-up. Number 1, do you know, will there be penalties in this new legislation? Well, we are making this announcement today, and we will be looking at what countries around the world are doing. We will also put in place a committee of experts that will help us. Well, we will make that decision with the expert committee, but I have to say it's very important to include that in legislation, because we've seen just how difficult it is in Canada. Conservatives will be in office, and action on climate change should not be a political issue. Yes or no, will you have to increase the carbon tax to achieve your targets? Well, nothing has changed. We've always said that we will review the price on pollution between now and 2022. But what is discouraging is that we have conservative politicians like Doug Ford who are fighting us in court, and they want it to be free to pollute. But we are moving forward. Doug Ford is leading a campaign, but I don't think it's working that well. And he's saying a lot of things that are untrue about our plan. So we will continue to work, and a price on pollution is only part of the plan, but it's so important to have a price on pollution. It's part of any plan, any serious plan to tackle climate change. But we have brought in many other different measures, and we will be working with experts, as I said, to look at what we need to do. So you're asking Canadians to trust you, and you'll bring in a real plan after the election, but right now you don't have a plan. Yes, we do have a plan, and I encourage Canadians to look at it. And I'm very pleased to present it to you. It's called Clean Canada, and it explains how we're going to meet our targets, including a price on pollution. And that was negotiated with the provinces in negotiations that ended in December. No, I can give you a copy of the plan. It'll clearly state what we're doing now.
The Toronto Star. Government projections, you're already on track to fall short based on current measures of the 2030 target. Now you're saying you'll exceed them, but you're not presenting any new measures. Can you explain how that makes sense?
So we have a plan to meet our 2030 target. We already, with existing measures that are modeled, we are 3/4 of the way there. And let's talk about the plan. It has more than 50 measures that were negotiated during 1 year with provinces and territories. We backstopped many provinces and territories that have walked back on commitments, and we've announced new ones. So in our climate plan, we have a price on pollution. Unfortunately, Doug Ford, other provinces are fighting it. We have a price on pollution while we're giving money back to Canadians. We know that part of any credible climate plan, you need a price on pollution. We're phasing out coal and making sure there's a just transition for workers and communities. We're making historic investments in renewables. We have moving forward in a net zero building code. We have the toughest methane targets in the world for the oil and gas sector. We're making historic investments in public transportation, and we're doing much more. Recently, we announced a $5,000 incentive for electric vehicles. We announced that we're moving forward on doubling the amount of nature we protect. We're tackling plastic pollution, which also, through the production and breakdown of pollution, causes emissions. We're going to be moving forward on banning single-use plastics. And we have other measures those measures plus provincial measures will help us meet our target for 2030, but we need to go further. That the science shows that we need to be net zero by 2050. And that is ambitious. That is ambitious for the countries that signed up for it, for the businesses, but that's the kind of ambition we need. And we're going to do this in a way that I hope takes us out of the political realm, that we're going to legislate targets every 5 years with experts. And we're also going to ensure a just transition for workers, because at the center of any climate plan are people. And I'm really proud to look at the folks behind me, that we have leading inventors, innovators, young people who understand what a cleaner future looks like and the huge economic opportunity to do better. We can do better how we build our homes. Our homes can be net zero. We have the CHIO model home. It is net zero with an electric vehicle. That is what we can do this. We can be ambitious. We can, make changes in the way we, live our lives, to have houses that cost us less money because they're more energy efficient, vehicles that cost us less money over the longer term because they're more energy efficient, companies like this that provide solutions that folks need and that create good jobs here. That's the future we want, and we need to be ambitious on this. But let's be clear. This is a critical election because the conservative politicians don't understand the science behind climate change. They voted against our motion, just recognizing that we are in a climate emergency, and that is what the science says, and that we need to meet our international obligations. That Andrew Scheer would take a lead from Doug Ford, make it free to pollute, although the courts have shown that pollution knows no boundaries, and we need to be able to act nationally to tackle pollution. He would remove the incentives for electric vehicles that are helping folks save money, the investments that we're making, historic investments in public transportation so people can get around in a cleaner way, investments in clean technology solutions and energy efficiency, going back to coal. That is all at risk in this election. And that's why I'm here again, because I don't want to go back to the time of Stephen Harper. That's exactly why I got into politics. I didn't like the direction of this country. And when we see young people marching in the streets, we need to listen to them, and we need to listen to our scientists, and we can move forward. We know what the solutions are, and I certainly hope that Canadians will recognize that, and they will choose forward.
Just on the, you mentioned a few times the importance of legislating climate action and targets and this idea of having the panel. Couldn't the next government, whatever it is, just dismantle that law that you had passed? Like, how does passing a law sort of set it in stone if there's no penalties, and presumably another government could just strike down that law?
Well, first of all, we have an election, and we are showing what we have done in the last 4 years with Canadians, and setting out what we would do. So the first thing we need to do is get through this election, because let me tell you, if you have a Conservative government, we're going back in time, and I don't know whether we can recover Canada. We've done amazing progress with Canadians, with cities, with businesses, with schools, with hospitals, with young people to be more energy efficient, to save money, to tackle pollution, to invest in the technologies and the solutions we need. But of course, any government can do anything, and that's a sad thing. And I say that with great sadness that the first thing Doug Ford came in and did was he made it free to pollute, and he canceled programs across the board that were helping businesses, schools, hospitals, universities, people save money. It caused havoc for businesses, and you can talk to folks in the renewable sector, but also it was bad for people who wanted to be part of the solution and wanted to save money. But I believe in Canadians. I believe in the young people who are marching the streets, but I also believe in their parents and grandparents, that they recognize that what we are seeing, the floods every few years as opposed to once every 100 years, the droughts, the fires, they are recognizing that we need to act. And they also recognize that we have the solutions. And so I'm an optimist. I'm optimistic that Canadians will recognize the importance of this election, that we need to choose forward, including on climate change, but also in growing a clean economy and continuing creating jobs with Canadians. And then we do need to move forward, and I think legislating emissions is part of this, targets is part of it. We need to have certainty for business, certainty for Canadians, and we need to hold politicians to account.
Hi, Mr. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. You say you need to get elected before you outline penalties for this legislation, but you're asking Canadians to buy into your climate plan. So don't Canadians deserve to know what's at stake before they vote?
Oh, I think Canadians know well what's at stake. They know that if they have a choice. We have outlined what we're proud to stand on, what we've done for the past 4 years on climate change, and now we're outlining what we would do next. Do we have all the details? No, but let's be clear. We are saying we need to be net zero by 2050. We're saying that we need experts to help show us the path to get there, that we need to make sure workers are part of the transition, which is why we'll have a Just Transition Act, and yes, that we need to legislate targets. And this is exactly what happened yesterday in New York. You had 66 governments and leading businesses saying the same thing. And we're going to figure this out, but the first thing we need to do is we need to get through this election, and if we get elected, we will move forward on ambitious and pragmatic climate action that tackles climate change, takes action based on science, and also grows the economy and creates good jobs for everyone. Or Conservative politicians will go back in time. They will go back on everything we've done, and we can be sure they're not going to be making commitments like the one we're doing.
One of the governments that has been dragging their feet is Germany. Their environment minister is very strong, saying, we want to get to net zero, but nobody knows how to do it. So, I mean, this is one of the leading countries in the world saying, we don't know how to do this.
So I talked to a CEO about this. In life, you need ambition. That you don't start a company and you know exactly how you're going to get to be the big company creating the jobs. We need ambition. We need to have targets, we need to make them, and we need to figure out the path that's there. But let's just talk about what phones everyone has. 20 years ago, what kind of phones would everyone had? Lucky if you had a flip phone. Certainly didn't have an iPhone. that the cost of renewable energy has gone down precipitously, where in many cases it's much cheaper than fossil fuels. That you look at how we have, imagine this, in Ottawa we have Chio's dream home. It's a net zero home with an electric vehicle. We have a huge opportunity. Do we know every single way we're going to get there for 2050? No. And we're going to figure out what is the way that does it best to grow our economy and create good jobs and make sure people are part of it. But we need ambition on climate. And let me tell you, what has hurt us the most is when people don't believe that we can take action on climate change, when people don't believe the science. But I want to thank the environmentalists who've worked on this for decades, for the young people who are on the streets who are saying, work harder, because that has motivated us to work so hard. And unfortunately, there are far too many fights on climate action instead of fights to tackle climate change here in our country right now with conservative politicians. But we need to be moving forward. We need to be ambitious. We may not know exactly how to get there, but that's the same of all the countries that have committed to this and the businesses. But we will figure this out. And the way we will do this is having a serious climate plan with credible and pragmatic action by listening to the science, listening to the experts, and most of all, listening to young people in the streets who are saying, are you going to act for our future? The economic opportunity is clear, the moral obligation is clear, and the will, certainly from Liberals, is there. And this is going to be a very big election where people will have a choice, Canadians will have a choice. Choose forward to take serious and ambitious action in Canada and with the world on climate change, or with Conservatives go back in time.
Hi, Ms. McKenna. David Cochran with CBC News. What you're outlining here today to hit these targets would require a significant restructuring in the way many Canadians live, and certainly how the economies of at least 3 provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador, would have to restructure to meet these targets. So you've given us very few specifics. You've given us a destination, but not the stops along the way. You say the choice is clear. Why can't you stand here with greater clarity for how this will affect Canadians on their daily lives and how it will affect the economies of your 3 big energy-producing provinces?
What I can give you clarity is what business leaders are saying, including Mark Carney. So Mark Carney is the governor of the Bank of Canada, Bank of England. He used to be the governor of Bank of Canada. He's been a climate leader. He's talked about the economic opportunity of climate action being $26 trillion. It is the biggest economic opportunity of our lifetime. I can tell you the cost of climate change. In Canada, just the insured costs alone in the last decade have gone from $400 million over a year to $2 billion. But in some cases, particular incidents like the forest fires in Fort McMurray, over $2 billion. I can tell you what the science says. The science says that Canada is warming at twice the global average, 3 times or more in the north. I can tell you that internationally, the Paris Agreement sets out that we need to be making decisions based on science, and if we're going to say well below 2 degrees, striving for 1.5, we need to be net zero by 2050. We know what the solutions are. We know what the solutions are. We don't know every single solution, and we need to figure this out as a country. We need to come together. We need to be supporting each other. We need to be supporting our energy workers. I am I was the environment minister for everyone, whether you're an energy worker or you're an environmentalist or you're a young person or you live in the north. We need to figure this out as a country, but people want cleaner air. People want cleaner water. Young people don't want to live thinking that they won't have the same future, sustainable future that we have. People don't want to be living in fear that they're going to have a flood every second year when it's supposed to be once every 100 years. We need ambition as a country, but most of all, we need practical plans where we move forward, and that's exactly what we've done over the last 4 years. That is what, if we are re-elected, that is what we will continue to do. We will work with experts. We will work with anyone who has solutions to tackle climate change, and of course, we will work with Canadians in all provinces. And if you look at provinces like Saskatchewan, they have huge opportunities for solar and wind. They have ingenuity of their workers. That as we look at phasing out coal, we've had a just transition task force working with workers and communities, that everyone has to be part of it, and that transitions don't happen overnight, and that we have taken a pragmatic approach to tackle climate change where Canadians are at the heart of it, and that's what we're going to continue doing, and we're going to continue working with Canadians. Sadly, I would wish conservative politicians would do the same, because if you do not have a plan for the environment, if you do not have a plan for serious time for tackling climate change, you don't have a plan for taking advantage of the $26 trillion opportunity, but you don't also have a plan to deal with the costs that we are all paying right now that are just going to increase and are a debt that we will be leaving to our children and grandchildren.
With all due respect, Minister, we're not seeing a plan today. You've been asked very specific questions on whether carbon pricing will have to go up after 2022. No answer. You were asked if there are penalties in the 5-year legislation. No answer. We've asked what specific impacts this will have on your energy provincial economies. No answer. This is a target. This is not a plan. This is an election. You say people have to make a choice. Can't you put on the table specifically what it is they're choosing if they vote for you and vote for this target?
So first of all, they're choosing to build on the progress that we have made, that we are the first government that has a plan to meet our target, that we have implemented parts of that plan, we are moving forward, and that's improving people's lives. Whether it's investments in public transportation, investments in clean technology companies, investments in doubling the amount of nature that we're protecting, tackling plastic pollution, phasing out coal, bringing in methane regulations, those are very practical measures. I'm not going to stand here and say what our exact plan is to 2050, because we need to make that plan with experts. Yes, we need to work with provinces. I mean, hopefully provinces, provinces led by conservative politicians will show leadership. We're very lucky to live in Canada. We have the natural resources that we need for the economy of the future, whether it's for electric batteries for vehicles or solar panels or the ingenuity of our workers. We can figure this out, but what we can't do is ignore climate change. What we can't do is ignore the economic opportunity of climate action, because that's not going to help our workers, that's not going to help our economy, and that's not going to help build a cleaner future. We have outlined what we would do for until 2030. We will continue building on that, as we have been doing, and we will work with experts, if elected, to develop a plan for 2050, which is exactly what other countries around the world are doing and exactly what other businesses are doing, leading businesses.
Last question, Tom.
Tom Perry with CBC. You've got a just transition fund in this. Have you thought about how many workers are going to have to transition out of the traditional energy sector under your plan?
Look, the transition is happening already. We're seeing huge opportunities. No one's going back to coal. That there are 5 times more jobs in renewable energy. We did create a just transition task force for workers affected by the coal phase out, and that has been very useful in terms of working with labor, with businesses, listening to workers and communities. And we believe our energy workers will be part of this transition. They have great skills and ingenuity. And this is a long-term transition towards a cleaner future. And look at the jobs that are created right here at Switch Energy. But I see jobs across the board are created by clean technology companies. We're also really lucky. The natural resources we have are the natural resources that we need in the future for things like electric batteries. The opportunity is $26 trillion. That's Mark Carney, the Governor of Bank of England, has put it at that. That is an opportunity for Canada to lead the way. We know that businesses and governments that are going to be the most successful in the economy of the future are the ones that are going to be choosing clean technologies. They're going to be building a cleaner future, and it's also good for people. It means cleaner air. It means cleaner water. And, of course, it means a more sustainable future for our kids and grandkids where everyone benefits. And that's the future I believe Canadians will choose.
Can you meet your targets with the Alberta oil sands producing at their current level, or do you have to see those oil sands being reduced and eventually phased out?
Look, I mean, we're going to need energy. We just need to be reducing our emissions. And let's be clear what net zero means. Net zero means that you can't put more pollution in the air than you take out. So there's still going to be a need for energy, but everything is going to have to be much more energy efficient, absolutely. And we have many companies, including energy companies, who have talked about the need to be net zero with technologies like carbon capture, use, and storage. There are huge opportunities to do this, and we need to do this together. And this is about working together as a country. We have always said this. This is not about targeting one sector. This is about choosing a cleaner future, choosing the $26 trillion economic opportunity, choosing cleaner air, cleaner water, making decisions based on science, and of course, making sure that we can look our grandchildren and children in the eye and say, yes, we recognize that we need to take action on climate change, and we took ambitious and practical action.
You can though do it with the oil sands still?
There are many energy companies, including in the oil sands, who have said that we need to get to net zero. So we will be working with anyone that wants to be part of the solution, that we have the technology, we have the solutions. There's a project, ELYSIS, that is net zero smelting aluminum. That this is 2050. The future looks very different. As I say, I wish I had a phone here, my phone from 1998. It would look pretty different from the phone that we use now. We have the opportunity to choose progress, to choose the clean solutions. We are making the investments that we need to do. We are working with businesses across the board, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Feel like, boom.
I'll keep this short since the video is so long, and congratulations for making it this far. How did you find that she responded to the reporter's questions? Leave a comment down below. Like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate if you want to, and thanks for watching.